When Splatoon 1 came out, one of its most notable inclusions was the single-player campaign. Despite being a multiplayer shooter, the game also featured a full story mode that was structured like a 3D platformer, with many bits of lore to make the world feel alive like no other Nintendo game. While it was pretty easy and partly served as prep for the multiplayer, a lot of the level design had its own flair, with bosses and a finale that made this part of Splatoon feel like something special. It's just not the kind of thing you're likely to replay once you've completed it, since if you're going back to Splatoon, it's for the multiplayer. As the Switch was coming around to get Nintendo out of Wii U hell, one of the first games revealed for the system was a sequel to the original Splatoon. By this point, the game had not even been out for 2 years, but they were already moving forward with the new game. Probably to make all us Splatoon fans migrate to the Switch sooner rather than later. And while the game had issues of minimal content at launch, just like its predecessor, nowadays, Splatoon 2 is a pretty meaty game that I've gotten a lot more out of compared to 1. Something that was at least always part of the game at launch was the new story mode, since the first game kinda set this obligation to have one each game. We got our first look at it from a trailer before the game's release. From what we saw, it seemed a lot like how the first game's single player worked, but instead of Captain Cuttlefish, Marie of the Squid sisters was the character to guide us. An interesting change, and one that may or may not have been influenced by the results of Splatoon 1's final Splatfest. Cats were robbed and I'll stand by this forever! The game came out, and after nearly 5 years, yeah, I don't hear anyone talk about this campaign anymore. If anyone's talking about a story mode of Splatoon 2, they're going to be talking about a certain DLC, but we'll get there when we get there. Like one story mode, I played it once at launch and then never touched it again, so this will be my first time playing it since. For how I'm going to approach this, I want to see how they improved upon the first game, and if they've at all expanded upon what a Splatoon story mode can really be. The Splatoon hype is still running through my veins as we wait for Splatoon 3, let's dive right in. Okay, since you still only have one save per profile, I booted up another one I got and began the character creator process again. I'm an Octoling girl in my normal save, but here, I'm an Inkling girl with short hair soon to essentially become a child soldier. Got our basic tutorial again, but instead of Egopolis Plaza, we're in Egopolis Square, with a new support from Off the Hook, better than the Squid sisters. The Great Zapfish, which is the source of power for Angopolis, has mysteriously vanished, but more importantly, Callie of the Squid sisters has also gone missing. Surely we gotta put together some sort of search party to learn about her whereabouts. Nah, Pearl's right, they'll come back eventually. Oh, and there's this little bit about Pearl pointing out how all these Inklings are rocking these new hairstyles. Another time. If you want to do something about the missing Zapfish and Callie, all we gotta do is go down this manhole. Entering takes us to Octo Canyon, with Marie waiting for us there. She introduces herself to us as being the pop sensation from the Squid sisters, but we have no idea who she is. And my reason for this could be how many newcomers are entering the series with 2 because who wonder Wii U, but the in-universe reason is that our character was too busy with extracurricular activities to watch TV and media on the Squid sisters. As the second agent of the Squid Beak Splatoon, Marie explains to us how the Octarians are the ones who've stolen the Great Zapfish, and asks for our help in recovering it. Just like before, our silence translates as a yes to this dangerous mission. And thus, we have become Agent 4, another silent protagonist that we have very little to grasp on. Taking out the character chart for 2, Agent 4 is described as down for whatever, which you can take however you want, really. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all make your own headcanons and interpretations kind of characters. If y'all got any fun ones, let me know in the comments, I'm kind of curious. Okay, so I only found out about this a month or 2 ago from Chugga's current Let's Play, but on the Splatoon 2 website, there's a page called The Squid Sister Stories, a few chapters focusing on Callie and Marie's relationship after the final Splatfest of Splatoon 1. Pretty much going into how their careers began to take off in different directions, leading to the two cousins, oh yeah, they're not sisters but cousins, I forgot to mention that in the last video, spending way less time together and drifting apart as a result. I wouldn't necessarily call it a must-read, as you can already infer a lot of the info given in these stories, and the last few chapters are merely set up for Callie's disappearance, and Marie going to Angopolis Square. Still a neat read for any Splatoon fan, so I'll leave a link to it in the description below. So our adventure begins anew with the exact same structure. Go through a linear stage and collect the mini Zapfish located at the end. Once you have all of them, there's a boss, and then off to the next area. A little thing about the hub world I didn't mention in the first video is that Octo Valley was all this massive area that you can easily move around to access all the levels. In Splatoon 2, every world is divided into separate areas that have load screens. While I miss how the hub world was a singular location in the first game, I do think this format is much better. Each area is much larger and unique with their environments, and the time of day also progresses the further you get into the game, which is good visual progression. As for the levels themselves, yeah, you already know the drill. Defeat enemies, platform through obstacles, find some hidden collectibles, destroy boxes to collect eggs, use those eggs to upgrade yourself, mini Zapfish to kidnap, that's all here again. Starting out, your hero shot is much weaker than it was in 1. Like, just look at that fire rate difference. It doesn't make the starting gameplay a slog, but you will have to play a bit carefully before upgrading it. Luckily, you don't just have the hero shot this time, as thanks to Sheldon, we have 9 weapons at our disposal. For most stages, you'll be assigned a weapon to use, and the level design will be based around getting the most out of it. This by itself adds so much more variety than the first game's campaign. You're not just getting used to the basic splatter shot, but most of the other types of weapons you can use in multiplayer. It also goes a long way in making more creative stages. Okay, so remember how I praised the level design of 1? Well, 2's levels blow that game's out the water because god damn the levels in this game are fantastic. First off, the environments are even more whimsical than before. We're still traversing through domes with floating platforms all around, but we've got a great number of unique settings like this bright and sunny sea area, or this space-like area with train tracks and teacups floating around. It's not the most different, but they worked with what they got. Now when it comes to the level mechanics, oh my god, they added so many phenomenal mechanics to make these levels a blast to go through. You got all the things from 1 back, like invisible terrain, the sponges, flutters, all that junk, but by level 3, we get introduced to these dash tracks which launch you the second you touch them. A simple but fun new addition. Rule 2 though, we got Rollonium. These tubes that go flying in the direction you hit them and wreck enemies. This is paired with the roller to really make it feel like you're smacking a string into an enemy's face, and it feels really satisfying. But who cares about that when you got grind rails, one of the best additions to Splatoon's gameplay. They work like grind rails on something like Sonic, where you can jump between adjacent rails, but the game feel here is so good. Something about the way you jump between and off rails has this really nice flow to it. Seeing as this is Splatoon, however, you're able to turn into a squid to avoid obstacles, or aim and shoot while grinding on rails. They're also about balloons and such for you to shoot, and it's such a thrill to shoot while grinding. They introduce us in a level with frickin' dualies too, so this level is just non-stop movement with action after action being chained together. One of my favorite levels in the game right here. To dial it back down a bit, we now have big squeegees, because apparently the most annoying obstacle in 1 needed an older brother. While it's a tad clunky to deal with, I can't deny that it is pretty fun to ride and run over any unfortunate sap that's nearby. The bounce pads are a simple addition, but it's another fun mechanic for platforming, and Squid go jump. Ink furlers, those are pretty neat as well. When you shoot them, they unravel into platforms, but any shot from an enemy can roll them back up, so that's something to watch out for. Grapple Links though, another banger mechanic right here. Shooting them makes you zip straight into their location, making for another fun method of movement. The introduce an idea and then evolve it as the level goes on mentality is still here for 2, but levels are able to blend a lot more elements together into 1. The first game limited a level to usually being based around only one unique mechanic, but 2 is a lot more willing to mix and match ideas if it makes for a more interesting stage. Like, we got the invisible terrain back, but throughout the level, let's also put some ink rows right here, dash tracks over there, and then at the end of the level, let's end it with giant squeegees that you ride on with long-range enemies hanging around. Both the gimmicks and weapons you're assigned end up giving each level their own unique identity. There were a number of times throughout my playthrough where I went, oh yeah, this stage! I may suck at sniping, but I loved this level where you have to use a splatter shot against all these other octo snipers in this really explorable area. Even if you don't like a certain weapon you're assigned, it's hard to deny how well designed these levels are with those weapons. We got a few new enemies occasionally thrown into levels. You got these Octarians inside bowling balls rolling around some levels, and you gotta find the best means of maneuvering around them. This guy is commanding this giant flying octo stomper that you're able to get on top of. There are these funny little guys that shit out bombs and run away from and run away from you while usually containing a key. You have to think a bit about how you're gonna cut off its path and catch it. Some regular enemies even get upgrades later on in the game. The Octo Troopers get these thrusters to dodge left and right from your shots, making them bastards to fight at points. Other than some new gimmick enemies and a few upgrades, you'll still be mostly finding the same enemy types throughout the game as you did in the first. Not a big deal since multiple weapons doesn't make every encounter the same, but if a wide new selection of enemies was what you were looking for in this game, I'm sorry to say, but I already said the disappointing news earlier in this paragraph. At least they ended up improving the 2 levels I disliked most from the first game, the Octo Striker and the Octoling levels. For the former, the Octo Striker levels are so much better in this game, because they don't exist. Okay, but seriously, props to how they improved the Octoling levels in this game. There's still one per area after the beginning, but they made a number of changes that went a long way. You're back on multiplayer maps, but instead of simply making it to the enemy side, you have to collect these mini zap fishies scattered all around, and the levels end when you collect the final one. This means that you actually have to explore the whole map instead of a linear trek to the end. There's a lot more changes to the levels as well. Sprinklers can be placed around, and occasionally, enemies like Octo Snipers will act as extra obstacles to avoid when going through the map. The Octolinks finally have more than just the basic Octo Shot. Yeah, they now have weapons like rollers, blasters, sloshers, actual variety. They're still not that hard to fight since you've got the armor system on your side, but it's not the exact same song and dance every time you fight them now. I think it's a good time to bring up how they've reworked your health system. There's still the armor cases you can pick up to stack more defense on yourself, but it didn't notice quite as many throughout my playthrough. Instead, the hero suit acts as a sort of armor from the get-go. When Agent 4 takes too much damage, you'll lose the hero suit and enter a critical state. During this, your speed is dramatically reduced, and any good hit is down enough to kill you. You'll recover the hero suit after a little bit of time, or by doing actions like reaching a checkpoint, or picking up another armor case. It's an interesting change to how health works that I end up really liking. The Octoling levels are still the weakest levels in the game, but I find them a lot more interesting to play through than before. I at least have to actually explore the map to find the sunken scroll this time. Yeah, sunken scrolls have returned, with 27 new pages of lore to sink your teeth into. While the Splatoon 1 Sunken Scrolls had a major focus on the history of Splatoon, you know, all that destruction of humanity and great turf war junk, 2's focuses more on how the world itself has changed between both games, and more general bits of world building. There's also these scrolls you can get in the overworld that give you stickers. I mean, that's cool. We get a number of scrolls based on Salmon Run to give more context for that mode, but we also learned how Spike made a fortune off his business in Splatoon 1, the regulations made to the special weapons, giving an in-lore reason why those specials are no longer here, some program feature Marie solo, you get the idea. I like the one on the social media post by Teen Inklings, showing off more of the life of Inklings outside of battling. 2 sunken scrolls that have stuck in my brain are the ones giving some origins on each member of Off the Hook. There's a cute little picture of Pearl as a kid, apparently damaging a venue with her vocals, good lord. Marina's scroll reveals that she was actually there in the audience during the final fight of Splatoon 1 as part of the Arcturian Force, which is really interesting. I wonder if there's any part of this game that elaborates on that fact. Of course, we got some more Judd lore, specifically on Lil Judd, the new judge of 2 that represents the opposing team. Judd may have been the only mammal to survive the end of humanity thanks to his owner, but knowing that he would be lonely in this new world, reactivating the capsule would give life to a clone of Judd, and that's how Little Judd came to be. The wildest thing to come from this, in all honesty, is that in the character chart of 2, Little Judd's feelings towards Judd is, I've known from the moment of my birth that I'm just a replica of you. How could you ever understand my feelings? And that's just, oh my god, this cute little guy's going through an existential crisis. Maybe all that stress is the reason his fur is all messy in 3. The Sunken Scrolls in general are still a treat to read and act as another interesting dive into Splatoon's lore, but I think this should be the last game we really have them. 1 and 2 have gotten enough use from them, and I believe we should have another form of character and world building as part of the story mode in 3. In this game though, finding the Sunken Scrolls is way harder than the first game. Okay, so you know how I said in the Splatoon 1 video that I didn't have much issue finding the Sunken Scrolls and only missed like one? Several times in my playthrough, I ended up missing it and had to replay the level as a result. Not every single scroll is incredibly tricky, but for a good number of them, you really have to be aware of your surroundings and look at any areas you may normally look past. Like, I completely missed the Grapple Links in this area during my first run, but lo and behold, getting on top of these flitters led me to a scroll. You can also find the Sardinian hidden in each level and in each overworld. They're much easier to collect than the scrolls, but in terms of what they do, they just act as an extra currency you have to upgrade your weapons, fire rate, incapacity, and sub-weapons. The Splat Bombs return, but instead of the Burst Bombs and Seekers, we got the Auto Bombs and Curling Bombs. I would have preferred the Burst Bombs instead of the Auto Bombs if I'm being honest, but the Curling Bombs are an excellent way to go across enemy ink. You can upgrade your other weapons besides the Hero Shot, but I never had the spare eggs to do so. Upgrading yourself is way more expensive than the first game, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I like it at the start because it really makes you feel like you have to work to improve yourself, but by the end, you'll probably only max out your firing rate. If you want to fully max out your character, that'll take some grinding to do. If there's any pro to this, is that it further incentivizes the player to explore every nook and cranny in levels, not only for the scroll and Sardinian, but more eggs. In Splatoon 1, I kinda just found the scroll and then made a straight shot to the goal. You can also end up getting enough eggs while replaying levels with different weapons, as there is an incentive for this. By playing through every kettle with a specific weapon, you can unlock it as part of the multiplayer. As far as completion goes, you should only do this if you really want to, as you're just gonna be replaying the same levels over and over, using weapons that clearly weren't designed with them in mind. It's not exactly a goal that interests me, I'm just content with getting all the scrolls, but I do find it an interesting challenge during bosses. While I've gone this far without mentioning the bosses, and compared to 1, they're a good improvement. I like these bosses a lot more than the first game, not only because their attack patterns are more complex and unique between fights, but they play around with specific weapons you're given. The second boss is right as hell for how it's a one-on-one roller fight, and the fourth boss is one of my favorites for how it's a creative test of your sniping skills, with a completely distinct arena designed with the fight in mind. The Octo Stomper does end up returning as a third area boss, but they have fun revamping the fight. The titles crack me up too. These fights aren't really much harder than the first game's bosses, but they're still fun against the areas. After the end of each area, you're given a small conversation with Marie, similarly to Cuttlefish in the first game. Marie gives commentary and advice throughout the stages too, but I still end up hardly noticing them in the midst of levels, unless start nagging me for going after every collectible. If you're watching someone else play the game, it's way easier to read any noble dialogue, or if you continue talking to her in the overworld. Besides Marie, Sheldon also joins in on chats, seeing as how he's the only one supplying her weapons. Really, the only trait you need to know about Sheldon is said from Agent 4. This guy can talk! The game unfortunately stays too true to one story, meaning there's very little to begin with still. A lot of the dialogue between areas isn't all that deep. We learn that Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3 are somewhere else during this adventure that I wouldn't know anything else about. No, why would I know anything about that? And that Marie's goal here beyond finding the Great Zapfish is finding Callie, which is something even Agent 4 knew before she told us. It gets slowly revealed during the story that Callie is on the Octarian side, which is another easily predictable thing. But at least it's fully revealed in a pretty funny way. Like, regardless of how bare this story is, the charm of Splatoon's writing still shines through. Marie was my personal favorite Squid sister, so the idea of her being my guide was inherently awesome, and having the results of 1's final Splatfest have an influence on 2's story is pretty novel, but again, still nothing too deep. If you're hoping for a brand new narrative to really sink your teeth into, I'm sorry, but that's really not what's here. It's a revamped version of 1's story that puts more focus on the Squid sisters. What this game does do way better than 1 is the final world. I said in the previous video that I felt the level concepts were starting to run dry by the final world, but that's the complete opposite here. These are honestly some of the best levels of the story. They're still kind of harder versions of previous mechanics, but executed in a far more interesting way. This new grind rail level kicks so much ass. That sense of flow is further enhanced with all these later mechanics that have been introduced, and it's just, it's fun. The level design just remains consistently great all throughout. A cool detail about a lot of the stage music that I forgot to mention is that a lot of them have Callie's vocals in them, which is a nice touch. I was an avid lover of Octo Valley songs since Splatoon 1, and I love the songs in Octo Canyon even more. Callie's vocals are one thing, but as songs, they're a lot of fun to listen to. We get some returning themes from 1 like Tentacular Circus, the ultimate Splatoon fan with the Ox moment. Boss themes do a much better job of pumping me up as well. I couldn't find any creepy sounds in the back this time though, so no more creepypastas for us I guess. But forget all about that, we finally made it to the final boss. Awaiting us in the final area is Callie, rocking a, oh wow, badass outfit, with the returning GJ Octavio, using the power of the Great Zapfish. Again, he brainwashed Callie into joining his side, and now they're about to drop a beatdown on us. Octavio fights incredibly similarly to his first fight. You avoid his attacks, and then shoot back the fist he launches at you. He'll add new types of attacks as the fight goes on, like a dash attack, and fists you can't shoot back, but unlike 1, you're in a fixed circular arena the whole fight, which is kinda lame in comparison. This fight is much shorter too, so it ends up feeling like a lesser version of 1's fight. What is better than 1 though is the music for the first phase. We got a remix of Callie's solo song, Bomb Rush Blush, and it slaps so hard! The way they turned this song into an epic final boss theme that incorporates bits of Octavio's theme is wild. It's hard going back to the original song without thinking of this rendition. I think this song is definitely much better than Octavio's theme in 1. The stakes just feel more escalated as you're listening to this. And then by the second phase, Marie snipes the hypno glasses off of Callie, initiating the next final boss theme, Title Rush, which is a remix of Marie's solo song, Tide Goes Out. And then it blends in with Bomb Rush Blush as both squids are singing their hearts out, and I don't have any fancy or unique way of saying how cool and hype this part is. It just is. But what's even more awesome is the final phase. Callie finally remembers who she is. She's back in her familiar outfit along with Marie. The Squid Sisters are back, debuting their new version of Calamari Incantation. Spicy Calamari Incantation. I still prefer the original song, but this one has grown on me a lot. The whole last part of this fight is on grind rails, with our last weapon provided by Sheldon, the Rainmaker. It's an easy back and forth of firing Rainmaker shots at Octavio's fists and dodging the spiral shots, but the atmosphere is off the charts just like before. The audience all around you, the Squid Sisters on the giant screens, Octavio getting aggravated on his second defeat at the hands of the Squid Sisters. The final push is more of a victory lap unlike one's final push, but it's one hell of a victory lap that, while being extremely similar to the first game, as a lot of parts of this game, it still remains a great note to end the story mode on. Especially how the final hit is stamping the Rainmaker right onto Octavio's face. Octavio explodes for the second time, or well, third time if you count the potential rematch of 1, and we cut back to the title screen for another news broadcast from Off the Hook. The Great Sapfish has once again returned to Inkopolis, but also Callie has been found. To celebrate the great news, a new track is played live. The new hit single from the Squid Sisters, Fresh Start, thus taking us to the credits. I prefer Maritime Memory, but Fresh Start is another track that's grown on me a lot, to the point that I really love it. It combines both the Callie and Marie solo songs into one, highlighting how they work best as a team. If we go back to Octo Canyon, both Marie and Callie will be there, as well as Octavio, back in his little globe. Callie can give you a few records on your recent multiplayer matches, as well as some more fun dialogue between the two sisters. Or cousins. Crap, but they got me again. I forgot to mention this about the first game, but rematching the final boss has unique dialogue to justify why you're doing it again, and it's a pretty cute way of replaying the finale. The same holds true for 2, with the context that Callie put on the Hypno Shades again, because she thought she looked good in them. Well, fair enough. And now, that pretty much wraps up the story mode of Splatoon 2. Do I think this is the better story mode than Splatoon 1? Yeah. The levels are way more interesting and fun to go through. Having access to multiple weapons adds needed variety. The bosses are a step up. The new music is good. The dialogue remains as charming as ever. As an overall package, it's an improved version of 1's campaign. But unfortunately, it's not much more than that. The story mode of Splatoon 2 improves on 1, but it doesn't evolve what a story mode in a game like Splatoon can be. It's kinda like Super Mario Galaxy 2 for me. I love that game more than the first because of the improved level design and mechanics, but its identity is inherently tied to its predecessor in more ways than would be liked. I get why this story mode has the same structure and nearly the same plot as 1. Splatoon 2 was a lot of people's first Splatoon game because, once a Wii U, so giving newcomers a better version of the story mode they never got to play makes a degree of sense. It's just that for those of us that played and loved Splatoon 1, we've done a similar song and dance before. Even if it's much better, we're not gonna be really wowed by it at all. Again, I still really enjoyed my time replaying this story mode, and I wouldn't mind playing it again sometime in the future, but it really missed the mark on bringing single player Splatoon to the next level. If you were hoping for a radically different and unique single player mode for Splatoon 2 that told a completely new story, you weren't gonna find that here. But if you waited for about a year, you'd get exactly what you wanted. Next time on the Splatoon journey, it's an Octolink's time to shine. Well, that seems like a good place to call it for this video. If you enjoyed your time at all, subscribing, liking, commenting, all that junk would be appreciated. If you missed out on my first Splatoon video, you can check it out right here, along with a bunch of other videos I've done in the past. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.